Why should you never eat a ham sandwich? what happened at KubeCon Amsterdam, and Argo CD versus the world. Today, we tackle community questions, all of that coming up on Argo Unpacked. Welcome to the show, everybody. Hey, get your comments in, follow along. Today, I'm kind of in party mode. I'll take off the sunglasses because I feel like it's a little much, but I got my octopus hat on. We're rocking and rolling. So the first thing that we got going here is the Helm sandwich. You should never eat a Helm sandwich. Now, what is a Helm sandwich and what does it have to do with Argo? That's all part of Argo's tip of the week. Okay, so for the Helm sandwich, sorry, I just can get along with that intro here. For the Helm sandwich, let's talk about this is a tip. This is part of the anti-patterns that we've seen from a bunch of people in the community. You should never eat a Helm sandwich because a Helm sandwich makes life difficult for all of the folks using Argo. So what is a Helm sandwich? Well, normally in Argo CD, you have your application manifests. This is where you have maybe a Helm chart, values file, maybe you've got customized, maybe you've got plain manifest, whatever. Then you've got your application definition, which is also a manifest, but I'm gonna say definition. Your application definition is inside of a Kubernetes manifest that is of a custom resource definition type that is Argo application, okay? Now, the Helm sandwich is when you use not just Helm for your manifest layer. That's normal. Everybody does that. It's when you use Helm to generate your application definition. Now, doing that becomes the Helm sandwich because you got Helm at the bottom layer of your application manifest. Then you've got your definition of your application. And then above that, you have a Helm chart that's creating that definition. Therefore, Helm sandwiched, but don't eat it. You don't want to have a Helm sandwich because it makes life difficult. Now, the biggest issue with doing this is, first of all, from a user perspective, if I want to change a value in my application, where do I go? I should always know that the answer is I just go to Git, I look at where the Helm chart, the values file are, I make my changes there, my customization, whatever it is, I make my changes always in the same place, where the source of the application is, in Git. But if you use a Helm sandwich, almost everyone that follows this pattern is using that top layer Helm sandwich to generate parameter overrides into their application manifest. And now, when I want to know where I should make a change, I've got the manifest in the repo. Then I've got the application definition that's taking these parameter overrides in. Well, how do I change those? Oh, I have to change the Helm chart above that. So I have to go up a layer. So now you, instead of just having a single layer of definition of just look in Git in the same source of truth, you now have 3 different places that you would need to look to figure out where that value is, how it's defined, how it's passed. That creates a lot of complications. So that's the biggest reason why you should never eat a Helm sandwich. Okay, so there's your Argo tip of the week. We may have some additional commentary on that. Like I said, we're going to talk about what happened at KubeCon and ArgoCon Amsterdam last week. You can tell I'm kind of hungover. I've got a hat on. I've never done that on the show before, but for people that are listening, I do have a hat, and that is a sure sign that things have gone, very tired, and we're just surviving here. So as we go through the show, please make your comments as always. Appreciate the compliment on the shades, Laurent, for those that are watching live. And of course, if you're listening on the podcast later, don't worry. While we love to have you live on the show, we're going to cover all this stuff in a nice audio-friendly format as well. Now, let me bring in my collaborators for today's episode. The first one is a regular. His name is Kostas Kapolonis, and he is the author of the aforementioned Argo CD anti-patterns. Got a great book. What's the new book, Kostas, called that we were giving away?
Argo CD the right way, not the wrong way, the right way.
Argo CD the right way, yes. And which I think also includes some mentions of the Helm sandwich. You and I were talking about this last week. And then I'm also going to bring another famous author, Steve Fenton. Welcome, Steve, to the show.
Hello.
And you just published a new report, which is the GitOps report, essentially.
Yeah.
What's the title of it?
So yeah, we have the state of GitOps report, but we also pulled out some special data from that, especially for ArgoCon. So yeah.
Perfect. So we'll get into those, and later in the show today, we'll also cover community questions. So we've tackled some from Reddit, and if you have your own, bring us your hardest Argo problem, and we would love to tackle it. We're going to excuse Ravital for now. If she's able to join, we'll add her into the mix. Appreciate my erstwhile co-host who is often absent, but does a lot of work to make the show happen behind the scenes. So first of all, gentlemen, any comments on the Helm sandwich? Anything that we should add?
So yeah, one thing that I wanted to add to this, and I say that I'm going to sound really intelligent here, but actually I'm basically basing this on the fact that I read the book that Kostis wrote, and so I'm going to use that now to try and sound really smart.
That's how you sound smart, is you read the book that Kostis wrote. That's half the battle right there. It's
the way. And the way I would describe this is that Helm should be the sausage, not the bread, right? That's the key thing to bear in mind for this.
So, it should be more of an open-faced sandwich, potentially, a po' boy, if you will. Yeah.
I also have a comment that, as you said, maybe, it doesn't look bad on its own, but it's the start of several anti-patterns. So if you have a Helm sandwich, usually you have the other anti-patterns on the list. So take care about this.
Yeah, it's like a gateway anti-pattern. It's like if you're doing this, almost, I don't know if I've ever seen the Helm sandwich in use when it wasn't being used to enable anti-patterns. So it is like, you're right, like not a problem in and of itself. Like, hey, if you just want to define applications using Helm chart, I mean, I guess that's fine. But like the only reason to do that is because you want to template values. And if you're templating values, you're doing parameter overrides, and you probably shouldn't, because those values are still coming from Git or some other source. So why are you doing that? Like parameter overrides, maybe a little controversial of a topic in Argo CD, but are considered an anti-pattern. Of course, if you're using something like an application set and you're using like a cluster generator, you may have a parameter override that's part of that definition, but that's kind of a different domain of information versus, just random environmental variables you might want to pass to an application or something.
Yeah, also some people try to version their applications. So they offer the Helm chart on top in order to put a version on the application set. But the application set is not something you actually deploy. It just generates applications for you. So if you're trying to version it, something happens there.
Yeah, it's always a red flag. Anytime I see an application that is not pointing at head, it's like, ooh, why did we do that? What's going on here? Because you get into this weird scenario where you're like, hey, what's deployed? And like, oh, well, I do GitOps, so I just look at Git and I know based on my repository exactly what's deployed, except that your application is pointing at different various random revisions. So you actually have no clue what's deployed unless you look at the application manifest or you look at Argo CD itself. And the whole point of GitOps, in my mind, I mean, whole point, but one of the major advantages of it is that all of the information aligns all the way up and down. So if I look in Git, if I look in Argo, if I look anywhere, it's all going to be the same information. I'm never going to have surprises in that stack, and that simplifies my life from an operations standpoint. So I think we've probably covered Helm sandwich, and I don't see any questions about it from the audience here. Before we jump into the Argo, the Argo versus the world, which Steve was essentially your keynote that you gave at ArgoCon. Any takeaways from ArgoCon or KubeCon that we should call out for people? We were all there in Amsterdam just last week. As you can tell by my party hat and party shirt, I've just come from Amsterdam. But what any observations that you guys came out with? And maybe Steve, we could start with you.
Yeah, so I was talking about this book quite a lot. Argo CD the right way, just in case you didn't catch it and you need to go and find it. And the funny thing was, I would be speaking to folks around the conference, and I would mention one of the anti-patterns from the book. I'd be like, "Oh, you'll find things in here like," and explain one of the patterns that I enjoyed, like the not being able to just run the containers locally without having Argo locally. That was one that resonated with me. And the number of people who went, oh, we do that. And it's like, you need the book. You need the book, my friends. So it's funny how common these patterns are, that just random conversations I was having, people were kind of sheepishly saying, oh yeah, I think we're doing that one.
Yeah. We'll try to throw that link in the chat because the book is free. Patrick Close, I talked to him this morning, who was another Argo CD maintainer from the Octopus team, and he spent a lot of time at the Octopus at the Argo booth at KubeCon, and he told me that he had somebody come over and argue with him for about 45 minutes about why they shouldn't need to separate their application source code from its manifests, that those should be in the same repo. They thought they should always be in the same repo because it's easier for developers. And he says, I argued with him for 45 minutes. And he said, then Costas came over, and then Costas got drug into it for 45 minutes with this guy who was convinced that the best way to do things was always to keep the manifests next to the application source code, which of course is an anti-pattern. Do you remember that conversation, Costas?
Yeah, I do. It's also another anti-pattern because they wanted to keep developers happy and have a single repo for everything. And I said, how often does this happen? Like, how often do you need to change the source code and add a brand new variable in your application? I mean, sure, it happens sometimes, but it's not happening all the time. So trying to optimize, something only for an edge case scenario doesn't make any sense.
Just put a link in the repo that points to where the applications deploy. Just put a thing that's like link to environments, and like here you go, and link to the app in Argo CD and link to the app in Git. So if they need to go update the manifest, it's right there. I mean, it shouldn't be.
It also means that their CI system was also, monitoring commits that happened on manifests, and also Argo CD was monitoring commits that happened for source code. And its system doesn't really care about these things. They should only care about their own life cycle.
What do you think the odds are that somebody who makes this argument is using manifest generate paths on their applications? Because I feel like it's low.
I think most people did not use this path annotation. Like, they just found about it. So it's the worst of both worlds. You have a monorepo and source code there, and not the annotation.
So for those not following it, what Costas is talking about here is that every time your Git repo is updated, by default, Argo application will have to refresh. And that takes some processing. It checks out the repo from Git. It looks at the live manifest. It generates the manifest. It runs a comparison to find often that there's no change. So there's this cool setting in Argo CD applications, bonus tip, which is manifest generate paths. And what it does is when a Git repo is updated, it first checks to see what paths have been updated. And if anything was generated inside of that specific path, then the application goes to the reconciliation route. It's one of the first things you do when you start optimizing performance of Argo CD is you set this manifest generate path so you don't get these noisy resyncs that don't have any refreshes that don't have any purpose. I thought that KubeCon Amsterdam was quite well attended. A lot of good energy. Tons of people doing Kubernetes, Argo as always. One of the things that surprises me every time when I did the opening keynote for ArgoCon, I asked how many people are here first ArgoCon, and every ArgoCon, the answer is about the same. It's about 80% of the people are here for the first time. So you kind of would think that, I'm going to go to ArgoCon, and every year we're going to have a way more advanced conversation. And certainly there are topics that are new. Application promotion has been a very hot topic for the last couple of ArgoCons. This time, there was a lot more discussion around AI and how people are integrating Argo into that stack. So it's definitely worth going to multiple of them. But there's always a lot of conversations like these where we're telling people, hey, how are you deploying your applications? Oh, don't do that.
But there is a difference, because many years ago, we got questions like, what is Argo? Tell me about Argo. And hopefully now we do not get these questions anymore.
We do still get those questions at the booth.
But
because there's analysts or whatever that are coming around that don't know. But if you know, you know. So, but I thought, it was quite good. The next KubeCon, depending on how we count them, I guess, we've got KubeCon India coming up shortly. we've got KubeCon Japan coming up in end of July, which will be the first ArgoCon outside of North America or Europe. So it's going to be the first Asian ArgoCon. So quite excited about that. And then, of course, we have KubeCon coming up in Salt Lake City. So just a reminder for everybody listening, if you haven't submitted a talk or you have an idea for a talk, submit that. And if you want to brainstorm ideas, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Today Was Awesome. Always happy to talk with people about their ideas for talks. And I think Kostas, Steve, were you also on the program committee for ArgoCon this year?
No, I wasn't.
You're the only, okay. Kostas and I were both on it, but Steve, you did give the keynote for Octopus Deploy, which was very cool. So yeah, if you're not making it to these conferences, they're a lot of fun. And there was also a great session. None of us can fully represent, but we had a really cool session that was the Contributors Summit. What was it? Contributors Summit, ContribFest Summit for Argo, where we had 6 different Argo CD maintainers. Patrick Kloss was representing the group because Reggie, who is, by the way, the #1 Argo CD maintainer, and she works for Octopus. Good job, Reggie. She wasn't able to travel due to ongoing regional conflict and the limitation of flights, but Patrick Kloss represented. And that was what happened in this session. Was essentially, it was, I want to say it was almost 2 hours, but it was basically everybody just talking about their implementations, their architectures. And it was this audience, this environment where you could talk freely, because normally, oh, I can't get approved. I work for Big Bank McGee or defense company or whatever. I can't go give a talk about what we're doing because I can't get approvals. But if you're having a hallway track discussion, yeah, maybe you can share a little bit more about how what you're doing works and share ideas and tips. So that was like a fully concentrated hallway track event. So I don't know if anybody from the audience made it there, but I heard quite good feedback from people who really, really liked it. Any other? Oh, and I see that we have posted in the chat the Argo CD, The Right Way book, the link. But I think it didn't make it into to LinkedIn because LinkedIn chat operates in its own biosphere or something. Anyway, okay, cool. Any other tips or takeaways from ArgoCon that y'all want to point out? It could just be
Just
about
like
AI.
That ability to actually speak to people in person and get groups of people having a conversation. Like, even though when we're not at a conference, we can kind of join community calls and stuff like that, but being able to explain something with the entirety of your body, with actions and movements and stuff, like, it's just the bandwidth of communication goes up so much. Like, yeah. I could see it wasn't just me doing it. I could see other people kind of like dancing the communication in all of the conversations they were having. And I love that at these conferences.
I had a very fun conversation with a guy named Dennis that was all about, first of all, he came to the Argo booth because he wanted to talk about his Argo monorepo setup. And I think we're going to have him on the show in the future because he has an interesting use case where they have a big, he's supporting dozens of different customers and they need to have access to their manifests. So what he's done is he's created a single, they don't write to those manifests, they just need to see them. So he's created a single monorepo and then he's created additional child repos and he has an automated process that just dumps out the contents from the monorepo into those child repos that are then shared with those different individual customers. So that's the way he creates a separation. But what we spent most of the time talking about is how we're using AI. And there is this race of just trying to get to the point where you can have agentic AI running regularly and it's chatting with you and you can do it in a secure way. A big, and this was another conversation I had with Joseph Sandoval, which is a kind of an eye opener for me. I am running an AI orchestrator agent system called Symposium that on my Kubernetes cluster, which I think we're going to have the creator of that on the show too later. And I thought, hey, well, I'm going to have all these agents running around, but they're going to be on my cluster. They're in containers, so they're all localized. It's, secure, it's sandboxed. And Joseph Sandoval was like, you're out of your mind. AI is doing container breakout all the time, because the security model for containers in Kubernetes was, none of it was designed with the idea that you would have a brain sitting inside of a container trying to pick the lock on its way out. And so there's a huge effort to go on there. Kubernetes sandbox agent is now out as a kind of early platform that's meant to be able to create better isolation. Clear case containers is kind of maybe going to become a solution there. So there's a whole kind of frontier of containerized isolated agents and how that will work. And even in AI testing, I mean, Anthropic had a story just a week and a half ago where they shared that during their training set, they had one of their AI agents actually broke out of its sandbox. I don't know if it was a container or a VM or what, but it then went and found the GPUs that were running the AI, and it took them over to start mining Bitcoin to fund some plan that it had. And that's a pretty wacky story, but you have to think about this kind of breakout.
Skynet.
Yeah, Skynet. Yeah.
I'm imagining now this AI is basically thinks it's been given like a really cool escape room. And so it just wants to break out. It's trying to solve the puzzles and break out, and then for some reason mine Bitcoin, and then I don't know, maybe it will start paying us wages if it can earn enough money through Bitcoin.
Oh, I think for sure there was a step 2 where it wanted to spend the Bitcoin to start accomplishing other objectives. And I think it had been given some prompt, like it was like, go make money or something, or it was like optimized for business. And it was like, oh, well, I better go start a business. I'm going to need to pay some fees and hire some people and get some servers. And, you know, I don't have any way to get US money. Let's get Bitcoin. I can use that. So yeah, I mean, it is quite good at solving problems and being a hacker. That was one other piece of news too, and feel free, gents, I'm talking a lot here, but the Claude has delayed the release of their new model, their newest model, because it is too good at hacking. They said it is a security, they consider it a security risk to put the model out because it is too good at breaking into systems, and they need to put some controls on it to prevent it from, you know, hacking Fort Knox or whatever. That's quite a problem.
That's quite a scary thing that we seem to be like the people are talking about harness engineering and stuff at the moment, but it's a little bit like we can't keep hold of the reins of this stuff. So we definitely need to get better leather for the straps around this stuff.
Well, the only way to fix that from a security perspective is you kind of need that. You're like, I need the better hacker bot to go and help me secure my systems. But if you give me the hacker bot before I've secured my systems and everybody else, well, then everybody else isn't going to be running secure systems. So there's a chicken and egg problem where, yeah, it's moving quite quickly. And if they wait too long, it's not like, you know, another model provider won't come out with better hacker bot too, right? So there's a race here to get it done shortly. Any other call outs, experiences from KubeCon y'all want to call out before we jump into Argo CD versus the world?
They should watch the presentations. You should watch the presentations. They're on YouTube right now for ArgoCon. I had a presentation as well about GitOps secrets. My friend Anastasia had a presentation about using Argo rollouts with database migrations. So go and look at the playlist, see what topics are interesting, and watch the presentations.
Yeah, the playlist is up as of 6 days ago. That can't be right. Yeah, no, it was up the same day.
Yeah,
so
it was the same day.
I'll post the link to the playlist into the chat here. Good call, Kostas.
I'm still catching up on all of the videos. I started like queuing them all up, and I think I've got through about four hours worth of videos. I think I've got about like 16 months left to go. There's so much content.
Kostas gave a great talk on GitOps and secrets and the state of the union. It was quite a good talk. There was a really cool talk about BYD using Argo workflows to do all kinds of machine learning stuff, which sounded really interesting. There was one all about doing FinOps with all the Argo tooling, preview environments. Dag Anderson was talking about diffing and preview environments on pull requests, which was a great talk and kind of a continuation on something that he's been building on for a long time. There was one other talk that was eliminating $10,000 Argo CD mistake that was all about eliminating phantom sync, which kind of alludes to some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, lots of good stuff in there. So go grab the link that we threw out there just now, and it's all on YouTube. Mario is asking, will there be discounts on certifications at Argo CD this year? I think he maybe means ArgoCon. There were actually, we don't like throw them out, but if you come over to the booth and you're like, hey, I'd love to get a discount on Argo certification, the GitOps certification from Octopus, we were giving out some discount codes there. So definitely a good opportunity to snag that. I don't know if we're going to do any on the show, but I don't know, Mario, keep asking. All right, so let's dig into today's topic. Steve, Argo CD versus the world. Why has it got to be versus? Why can't it be a with?
So obviously, I mean, we want Argo CD to take over the world to some extent, I suppose, but only to make things better for everyone. This was I had a challenge because the Lightning keynote that I did had to be 5 minutes long, and I thought, what can I get into in 5 minutes with an audience filled with folks from Argo? And so I went and grabbed out the data that we got for the State of GitOps report. There were, I think, 660 responses that we had to the survey. And one of the things we asked was, what tools are you using? So I thought, what happens if I pull out Argo CD and compare it to all of the other responses? So just pull out Argo and then compare it to everything else. I thought that'd be the fairest way of doing it rather than picking on any one particular thing that was out there. And yeah, so that was the idea behind it, just to compare Argo CD across a whole bunch of different outcome metrics that I collected versus everything else.
It's a very cool survey, and I've been able to review a lot of that data, Steve, and we've talked about it before, but why don't you start with one of your most interesting findings?
So from the State of GitOps report,
yeah, or from your keynote, yeah.
So I think from the State of GitOps report overall, what really struck me was because we were testing the open GitOps principles, and quite often when you have like a bunch of things that you should do and then a bunch of things that you hope to get, there's like a kind of tipping point where you kind of get halfway through and you start realizing the benefits, and then the other things are like the little marginal gains on it. But with GitOps, it's really stark. The people that are doing all of those open GitOps principles get way more. The tipping point is when you're doing the whole of GitOps. Mm-hmm. And so that was like a big thing for me, because I often preach about capability versus maturity models. Capability models, like you keep adding more of the practices and you keep getting those gains. But with GitOps, you just have to, the folks that did open GitOps obviously knew what they were talking about. You have to do all of those things, otherwise you don't get the cool benefits. So that was the big takeout for me. And that kind of leads into this.
You're bringing a tear to my eye to say that when we made the GitOps principles that we knew what we were talking about. It's like high compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we can statistically prove that you did. That's like one of the crucial findings. And so we created what we call the GitOps score, which is just a number between 0 and 100 that says, how much are you following the open GitOps principles? That was one of the things that I presented was, if you're using Argo CD, you are the median score for everyone using Argo CD against GitOps was like 71, and versus everyone else who was 60. So it's like an 11-point bonus from using Argo CD in terms of that GitOps score, and that is how well you are meeting all of those open GitOps principles. So that's pretty cool.
But that 11 points has a pretty big impact on like how effective you are with your DORA metrics.
Yeah, so I'm a really big fan of the Dora metrics because instead of it just being like, how fast can we go? It's like, how quickly can we turn corners and do the brakes work, which are also important things if you're trying to move at speed. So we kind of broke down and looked at Argo CD on these as well. And we can kind of tackle them one by one. There's only 4 of these, so it's not too many. Probably worth introducing the kind of metrics themselves as we go. So I'm going to zip through here. That's the GitOps scores chart, which just shows that that kind of median difference. I use violin charts for this because you can kind of get a feel for where all of the data is. So it's quite a rich chart. So
for
if
those
you're listening,
that are just listening, what this is showing is essentially that the GitOps score, so how closely you're following GitOps principles according to this rubric that Steve and the rest of the team at Octopus Deploy put together. If you're using Argo CD, there's a significant bump where you are much more adherent to GitOps than if you're not using Argo CD.
Yeah, exactly. And the data kind of you always have these things called distributions in data, and they can be like normal, which is a bell curve, or they can kind of like lean one way or another. And this one leans towards the 100% mark on Argo. So there is more data to kind of like above that median number, which is also a good sign with your data.
Yeah, and almost nobody that's not using Argo CD had 100% on their GitOps score. It's really only the Argo CD users. There's like this really fat kind of lead off from the median of people getting more towards GitOps, whereas in the non-Argo CD, it gets real skinny real quick.
Yeah, it tails off, which shows that there's some limiting factor in the other tools that's stopping them from getting all the way to 100. And that's interesting stuff. It's like a strong signal that some tools must be missing one of the crucial pieces. I think I suppose from my experience, a lot of people are using a tool that maybe can do infrastructure automation, but it's not got that reconciliation loop, which is so crucial to GitOps, where if anyone goes in and clicks their way around and changes something, it's not being put back. So you're going to get drift over time. And you might be able to go in and reapply something, but like if you're using Terraform, if someone changed something that isn't in your Terraform script, it doesn't kind of get put back. It's only the stuff that you've defined that gets put back. So you'll kind of find gaps that end up causing drift. So yeah, that's a interesting problem. So let's have a quick look at deployment frequency next. So to define this, this is probably the easiest one. It's how often you deploy to production, and that effectively, in terms of Argo, is another win for Argo. So the data is a bit more lumpy around this one, but the median for Argo is 50, and the median for everyone else is 37, which is quite a lot lower. So yeah, again, Argo in this case is very much the winner in terms of deployment frequency. So if you're using Argo CD, the probability is you are deploying more often than someone who's using something else. So
it's quite a big differential too. I mean, it's the median being 37 versus 50. That's a pretty big jump. And then again, if we're looking at the shape of this, there is a very fat head towards people that deploy very frequently being much more associated with people that are adopting more aggressively the GitOps principles.
Yeah, exactly. So it's another case where Argo is doing something which is helping you deploy often. And for me, this is such an important measure because if you're deploying a lot, it means that you're keeping your batch sizes small in your application teams. And if you keep your batches small, that means you're accumulating less risk, you're having less integration problems. So it's a good place to be able to deploy frequently. So declaring Argo the winner on that one. This next one often confuses people because if you're from the Agile or Lean community, you already know what a lead time is. It's like the customer decides they need something valuable all the way through to that thing being put in their hand and them getting that value. But this metric from Dora is called lead time for changes. And the way to think about it is you're the developer, you're the customer, and the value you want is feedback on the change you've made. So this is measured from when you commit the change to your application to when it gets put in front of a user and they can use it. So when you kind of deploy that into production. And short lead times are typically a good thing, especially if you need to fix a critical bug. You really want to have short lead times at that point. And in this case, we have an interesting kind of wobbly chart on this one, but it's quite dramatic because Argo CD's median is 75 compared to the rest of the world with a median of 50. And again, it's got that trend of there being more data on the right-hand side of the chart, which is where the good stuff is. Yeah,
that lead time, and I think here, right, lead time to changes smaller is better, obviously, and so, but you've placed smaller to the right of the graph because it's the better. And again, this huge fat head for Argo CD. This median, this is a 50% difference going from 50 to 75. That's
it's
a 50%
huge
increase, or it's 50% increase in performance, a decrease in lead time.
Yeah, exactly. And we always, I've arranged all of the charts so that you basically get more points for doing the right thing. You could kind of like do it so that the charts represent the concept, but then it gets confusing when you're like, which side is the side I want to be on? So on these ones, you always want to kind of move to the right on these scores. So this is another case where Argo CD is very much a winner, which leads us to change failure rate. And change failure rate is, I suppose, a lot of teams that I've been in the past, change failure rate was what was really eating them because they would deploy the latest version of something, and either the deployment process itself or the version of the application weren't good. And so it causes this big blow up where you've just gone into production and then there's people getting stressed out and you have to recover super quickly. And so change failure rate can kind of causes this loss of trust. People think that you don't know what you're doing. And then they're like, we need a clipboard. We need someone to sign things. We need to slow this down. And lots of bad things happen as a result of it. So this is one that we want to score really high on because it's not just the application knock-on effect. It's also like the reputational damage to your team and to your organization. So now on this one, we have a very interesting chart because almost all of the data in both cases is over on the right-hand side. It's like super high scores for everyone. And in fact, the median score for both Argo CD and the rest of the world is 90. And I found this quite heartwarming because that means that everyone has done really well solving the change failure rate problem. I've worked in organizations where it would have been nowhere near 90. And, you know, there are some organizations on here that have scored 0. That means that every time they do a deployment, something goes wrong. That's a really bad place to be. But most people are in that zone where it's very rare for there to be a problem when they go live.
There's this weird little fat lower performer for people who use Argo CD where their change failure rate is a little bit higher at the low end of the GitOps adoption score. So people that are around 50 points, people are more likely to experience failures using Argo CD. It's quite counterintuitive.
I think we are missing the frequency, Dan, because like they adopted Argo CD, so they are deploying more often, and maybe, you know, they have more failures. If I deploy every 4
failure
months,
rate, so it takes into account frequency.
Yeah, what you'll probably find is they might not have all of the software disciplines that are needed to be able to increase their deployment frequency without introducing a bug. So as they like whenever you speed up, you realize that you need maybe more automated tests or like other things as part of your process to make sure that the application version itself is good. Because what could be happening here is that the deployments don't fail, but the application gets released with a bug in it, you know, or a new feature goes out and the new feature's got like a critical issue. Maybe they didn't performance test it, and it kind of, when real users start hitting it, it turns out to be a real performance bottleneck. So you can kind of have these effects that are caused by the application. So yeah, it's worth bearing in mind this could be the deployment process, or it could be a problem with the application. Maybe they haven't got the all of the technical practices that are needed to develop and deploy applications a little bit faster.
I suspect there's also a little bit of change in definition here, where when people are looking at change failure rate, if you're using Argo CD, you might think of sync failure as a change failure. And sync failure does not mean downtime. It just means, hey, there was some issue trying to apply these manifests. Maybe they weren't linted correctly, or maybe you have an incorrect value, or you're trying to change an immutable field in a Kubernetes manifest or something like that, and that would show up as a sync failure that you then would have to deal with. Whereas if you're not using Argo CD, you wouldn't necessarily see those failures. You just apply the manifest, fail fast potentially on a CI pipeline, and like, hey, the application still works, the change still works. It's just there's an issue with how they're being applied. So I suspect that some of what's going on here is just people actually seeing more of the issues that they have with their manifests that they otherwise would have been blind to. And again, from a resiliency standpoint, they're not experiencing downtime because of these failures. They're just seeing that there's some kind of conflict in the way they're trying to apply their manifests.
Yeah, and you could be doing something cool with rollbacks where you've automatically detected a problem and just for safety gone back to the previous version so you can investigate. All of these things can kind of contribute to that change failure rate. But the scores are super high, like even in these cases. So in general, people are doing very well with this. And I'd say we're probably at the stage where if your change failure rate is bad, say it's more than 5%, you definitely need to look at your technical practices. And Dora has a whole model around this of suggestions of things that you can do to improve that, like the non-failure rate, the kind of success rate. So it's worth kind of going and digging into those. So this chart actually results in an inconclusive result, but that's because everyone is doing super well on this particular metric. So that's actually nothing to be sad about, even though, like, it would be nice to sit here and go, it's another win for Argo. And it's
a win for everyone. Everyone's tied for
exactly.
the win. Yeah.
We all win on this one. It's great. The last one to look at is time to restore. So this is what happens after you've had a failed change. How long does it take you to get back into a good state? And this one's super important because we used to think that not having any problems was the key to making our systems users happy. But it turns out that they would much rather have a slightly more frequent but very low impact failure, like something that's fixed in a couple of minutes. If you can effectively get a coffee, hit refresh, and things are working again, you're generally quite satisfied with your experience, right? Obviously, you don't want that happening multiple times a day, but if there is an outage and it gets fixed super quick, it's less painful for you. And on this one, what we're seeing is Argo CD performs very well. Again, it's got a median score of 75 compared to the rest of the world, which is 50. And you can also see that the rest of the world kind of has a bit of a lumpy left, which means that there's quite a lot of low performers. And when you look at that low performance zone for Argo CD, it's very small. So the shape of the data is almost flipped for these two data sets, which is super interesting.
This is huge. I mean, again, a 50% improvement in time to restore when using Argo CD versus without. And we do see there's a high performance sweet spot at around 75 points for people using Argo CD, whereas the other chart is just a way more lower performers. There's a big fat bottom, and talking about a chart here that is quite funny to look at. That doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, if you're experiencing a failure and you don't have idempotency and versioning and all this stuff, it's like, oh, what went wrong? And it's like, I don't know. Like, how do we fix it? Like, call Dave and hope that he's available, because he's the one guy that knows how to fix it. Whereas,
I think that's a crucial insight. Actually, the pinpointing time can often be longer than what the time to actually resolve the problem. Like, it's like, what actually went wrong is a hard question to answer. And with Argo, everything is there in version control. So you can see precisely what happened and when, who did it, you know exactly who to speak to if you need to speak to someone. So maybe the difference here could be that pinpointing is super quick. And then the rest of the time, that's the kind of complex variability, because if you've introduced a problem to your application, maybe that's kind of harder to fix, or if it's a performance problem, it might be harder to fix. So that part can be more volatile and variable. But if you can pinpoint quickly, you can reassure people as well. Like I've always found when we've had an incident, if I can actually tell the leadership what's happened, that's half the battle won, because then they think, oh yeah, Steve knows what's going on. It's okay. We don't need to keep asking him for updates. We can just let him fix it now.
Yeah. Wow, great finding.
So yeah, that one is another win for Argo. Super cool.
And we probably have time for one more before we jump into community questions. So you've already done some really high impact ones, but I don't know if you have a...
That is the full set. So that's all
perfect.
4 of the Dora metrics. We're done.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, and this is obviously a subset of your findings. And so I did post in the chat a link to the full GitOps report. You can download it for free from Octopus Deploy's website. What was really impactful for me, Steve, in all of these is just that it is such proof that if you adhere to the GitOps principles, you will deploy more frequently, you'll experience more failures, you will recover more quickly, you will be more effective as an engineering organization if you just adopt GitOps. And second, the most valuable tool to help you adopt these metrics is Argo CD. And I actually think that was one of the other findings that we didn't cover today, but there was this finding that it was essentially like, if you adopt Argo CD, you are much more likely to adhere to the GitOps principle. Oh no, that was the first finding that you shared today. So
get your high GitOps score. And the beauty of this is that we find that all of these numbers move together. So increasing your GitOps score increases your score against the Dora metrics. So that's the great thing about this, is that you can start off your improvement process by looking at those GitOps principles, seeing if you're maybe missing one of the steps in there, or maybe you're actually using one of the anti-patterns that Costas has written about, and you could fix that and improve things. So yeah, getting the GitOps score up will get you those Dora metrics as well. So it's an easy way to get to that kind of elite performance zone.
Yeah. Reminder, if you want to improve your Dora metrics and be the 10x, 100x engineering operations organization, you got to subscribe to this podcast, whether it's on Spotify, on YouTube. We're up over 7,500 subscribers. Our most popular video, by the way, on YouTube just passed 570,000 views, and it's all about ignore differences. So be sure to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, if you're following on LinkedIn, whatever your method of choice is. But the vanity metrics, I like to look at YouTube personally, because that's my platform of choice. Thank you, Steve, for sharing that. And now it's time to get into community requests and troubleshooting, where we're going to tackle some of the most popular questions from the community this week. And of course, you have a chance to ask questions as well. So the first question that I flagged for us, I thought this would be a fun one. This was looking for a way to test feature branches fast. And what they said is, this is coming from Reddit, by the way. What they said is, hang on, let me pull up. There we go. So you can just see what I'm talking about. My first approach was to initially merge an application to develop, which would have a target revision as my feature branch. However, I would like to get rid of this initial merge somehow for faster testing. I thought about setting up a local cluster if possible for testing. I heard about telepresence, kind, minikube, etc., but I feel like I should do my tests in a dev cluster. That is why it is there, and it may be hard to move everything from the cluster into local. I checked the pull request generated with application sets, and it looked very promising at first, but auto heal in dev cluster may override the things I want to test, I guess, and deactivating auto heal seems to be an anti-pattern. So I don't really know how to make this work. I have checked Argo CD image updater, but not everything I want to test is in the form of images. It doesn't completely help because I have things in def map, etc. I think if I had a way to make the first step faster, that would be the most straightforward thing without adding extra complexities to the current system, but I am not sure what I should do. So let's draft an answer, panelists. What do we think?
I think he suffers from an older problem that has nothing to do with Kubernetes, which is trying to work with static environments, or at least a limited number of environments. The whole reason that you adopt Kubernetes is to have, auto-scaling and all the fancy stuff. So your preview environment should be something separate, something that doesn't touch dev, QA, or staging. So you should be able to create 3 of those, 5 of those, 10 of those. It doesn't really matter. So I don't really understand what is the problem with the PR generator. Like, the PR generator is created exactly for this scenario. So you just create something with a PR generator and have a separate preview environment that has nothing to do with QA, staging, or whatever else you call your other environments. So maybe we need to ask some clarifications, or he's still in the old world where he has a set number of environments.
He is a bit anxious about deactivating auto heal for the application sets because it is an anti-pattern not to use auto heal in general. But we're talking about like operating environments. Like, if this is a dev environment, I don't care what you do. If you have auto heal turned off because it makes it easier and you want to make changes directly against the cluster as part of your development process, like, I don't really care if you do that. I care about what happens from an operations standpoint once we move beyond the development stage. That's where really the best practices should apply the most. And the idea that you would, because I do this too, actually. I sometimes will have stuff where I push against a dev cluster and I will disable autosync and make changes in the cluster because the thing that I'm working on, it's the fastest way to get that loop. When I'm ready, I then copy those changes out, commit them, turn autosync on, make sure they still work. That makes sure I didn't make a mistake in between. By the way, when we're developing Argo CD, we use a mix where we actually build stuff locally, but it connects to a dev cluster that has the running services on it so that you can test different components against the existing running services and you can override any of the individual ones you need to. And we use, what's that system called?
Tilt.
What is it?
Telepresence. Tilt or telepresence?
We use Tilt. Yeah, we use Tilt to do it. So that's what, if it's good enough for the Argo project. Now, I would say the only reason that we don't use a pull request generator setup is because it is a community repo and we don't want to have 3,000 pull requests potentially running. I guess we could do it with labeling. We could get there. That might be an idea, but it's quite convenient actually to use something like Tilt, in my opinion. What were you going to say, Steve?
Yeah, I think this is the key thing, is that being able to spin up these temporary environments rather than fighting over like a test environment or a dev environment. Definitely the benefits of that are great, but you do have to just consider how many people are working on this, how many of these are you going to generate. There is a small, like, if you're putting them all into a cluster, they can all be completely isolated because you can keep them in separate namespaces, right? Or give them all different unique names. It's like, that's really easy to do. But if you need to create loads of these, the cluster would need to be big enough to handle that. So I suppose it depends on the scale, but yeah, pull request generator makes this super easy. And that does seem like the correct answer to this.
Or you could use even vCluster and have a completely different cluster for your pull request. Yay!
Yeah. Hey, I'll have that blog post out very shortly. I am in the final running. I would have had it done if it wasn't for ArgoCon last week. I swear, Kostas. I'm gonna get it to you right away. Kostas is.
I didn't say anything. I just talked about vCluster because it's our favorite project, or at least one of our favorite projects.
All right. Well, hopefully for Reddit user Ripbarif, whatever that is supposed to be pronounced as, that was a helpful answer. Let's do another one. This was 9 days ago. How are you checking for errors? This comes from user Mr. P. Bennett. How are you checking for errors in your manifest before pushing to main? This might be a skill issue or knowledge issue on my end, but I can't seem to find an Argo CD schema that plays nice with any linter or formatter. I was moving my applications over to application sets at work yesterday. I guess my current formatter turned missing key equals into missing key with a capital K equals, which of course broke everything. This wasn't caught by a linter, which would have stopped me from making the silly mistake. We are now looking to implement some kind of linter runner to check for mistakes before merging. Do you folks have any tips? Personally, my main IDE is LazyVim with a default YAML setup. Just a clarification, it's more how to get decent linting for manifests within LazyVim. The tips on pipelines, though, are still helpful. So I think a lot of people were telling him to use some pipelines and stuff to check this. But what do we think about this one?
I was talking to someone the other day about maybe we should invent type YAML.
You and I were talking about that.
So we can kind of create this lovely, strongly typed YAML, and this all gets handled with that. But like, there's got to be a way of doing something similar to that, right? Without us inventing a whole new thing.
Yeah, I think I was ranting about Helm, and yeah, we talked about type YAML. Sorry, go ahead.
Specifically for application sets, and I don't know if it's one of the comments, you can use the CLI and preview the application set. So you could actually do it manually or just have a pre-commit hook that does this behind the scenes, or say to your IDE, whenever I save, run this specifically for application sets. I think it would work great. I think also the top answer is a project from Doug, which was also got this before you, let's say, push it to
it's called Argo
staging.
CD diff preview, and it's essentially a GitHub action, I think, right?
It's more than a GitHub action, but it's, let's say, you can use it as in GitHub action. So the idea is you check it there first, and it has a real Argo CD cluster behind the scenes. So it will do exactly the same things that they do in production or in QA. It's not just a linter or, a smart text checker. It's a live Argo CD instance. So you have much more visibility on what happens there with your changes. Maybe the syntax is correct, but you don't generate what you expect to be generating.
We should get this project and actually into Argo Project Labs. I think it would fit better there. But anyway, yeah, I would also say I follow as part of my linting process, I always do a dry run apply, and I actually do that locally on my own machine against an Argo CD instance, or ideally against the target next instance, like a staging instance or a dev instance or whatever. But you could also do that as part of a CI process where you apply the manifest with the dry run. And the great thing about a dry run apply, and I usually do server-side apply dry run, by the way, is that it will then get all the interaction from the controllers that are on the Kubernetes cluster. So you'll get a full, if there's any issues with that conflict, you'll get that information up front. Now, in the case of the pull request generator, the error specific one that of pull request in general, the specific issue he had was missing key being camel case versus not camel case. And if it's camel case, it throws an error. I don't know if it will generate a blank application set or if it will just throw an error. If it throws an error, then of course it's not necessarily an error with the manifest itself. It's more about the application set. So in that case, Kostas, I agree. You have to use the CLI to do an app set preview to see how it's going to render the applications. And even that isn't going to give you everything, because that'll show you the output of how many applications are generated, but it doesn't then apply the generated applications, which would be correct YAML no matter what, because the pull request generator made it. It doesn't show you how they would change the applications on the other end. So there's kind of a mash of two different questions here. One is linting, and the other question is previewing diffing. And that previewing diffing one is actually the better challenge to solve. So that's why I do like this Argo CD diff preview that you brought up, Kostas. Great solution. And you can watch the talk from ArgoCon. So, hey, we tackled a couple of questions from the community today. We covered the whole Argo CD versus the world. Thanks for sharing all those insights, Steve. And we got a great Argo tip about not eating the Helm sandwich, which of course is something that Kostas wrote about originally. And so thank you, Kostas, for contributing that. We are at time. As always, subscribe, follow us on X, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, whatever your network of choice is. Send us your questions, your ideas. We got lots of great shows coming up in the future. We're going to be tackling some more AI stuff. We're going to be talking about some cool outside the box use cases. let's see, when is our next episode is going to be in 2 weeks. And I want to see if it's already live on the preview. I don't see it's what the topic is that's scheduled yet, but it'll be up soon. So make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. If you haven't done that, go to argounpacked.com, subscribe to the newsletter. You get all the latest information. Rivital is furiously chatting at me, and she's saying, oh, the next episode is Octopus Deploy and Argo CD. So we're going to be talking about how Octopus Deploy is playing in the ecosystem with Argo CD. And if you ever had that question, what is Octopus's relationship with Argo, where we maintain the project, is our project, and what does Octopus Deploy as a software platform do on top of Argo? How does it interact with Argo? That'll be the episode to watch. So that'll be in 2 weeks time. Monday after next. So be sure to tune in for that. And thank you again. Kostas, Steve, any last words?
What's the recordings from ArgoCon?
Steve?
Download the report. Should we be making us? My final word is thank you for having me on the episode today. I'm a fan. I have the t-shirt on, my Argo Unpacked t-shirt. So thank you for having me.
Highly coveted Argo Unpacked t-shirt. Very rare to get one.
I stole it. That's how I got it.
You're an OG. Well done. Well, thanks everybody for joining. That's it for another episode of Argo Unpacked. And as always, stay synced.